Hey guys, it's Doa. You may think to yourself, hey, Doa's too nice to be on Thorin's channel. Why is he there? And you're right. He's locked me in his closet, and I'm being forced to record this. Help?
Now, I will probably call him Vetheo almost certainly, but I'll try to call him Vetheo and pronounce it the way it's supposed to be. Now, Vetheo is the hottest prospect to, I wouldn't say enter the LEC, because actually when he entered, he wasn't a crazy prospect. But I would say make himself known in the LEC since Caps in Season 7. So 2017, boys, 5 years ago. He is the best mid laner right now. He should win the MVP for my money. I think it's even a runaway case this time around. Although I wouldn't hate it. At the same time, if people gave it, for example, to Larson or Hillers, I can see the reasons why through typical old means. I just think you look at the team this guy had. I think this is a rare case, boys, where he's not only the best player in the league, he also qualifies by every metric to be the MVP. The only reason you could even say he isn't is because they didn't win the most games, but even then look how many games they did win, because that's the issue, and this is what I want to get to. This guy has dragged an average to below average roster for this split to a top 3 finish in the regular split, placing ahead of the likes of G2, Mad Lions, like top level orgs in theory, and people who, I mean, they should be able to stock a roster way better than Misfits should at this point in time. Mad Lions were reigning champions, and G2 has all the money in the fucking world, and people like Caps and Yankos that you'd want to play with. And this guy won so many of those games that they won in Misfits himself. Not only him, but sometimes only him, and then plenty of games he was just the best player in the whole server, sometimes even in the losses, by the way, and they had some epic comebacks, and one or two of them, he was like the reason they did it. So, yes, he's only played in 1 playoffs thus far in his career. So, obviously, even though I'm going to actually go hard as fuck in this video because I think the eye test and the other factors are insane for this player, yes, consider that piece of context, that caveat, while we're doing it, because obviously you have to eventually get it done in the playoffs if you want to be at the level I actually think this guy could be at. Thing is, though, even with 1 playoff run, not even a terrible one, by the way, the trajectory is insane for this player. I'm normally someone when the rookies come in, I think, come on, man. Like, you're just looking at the wins, or you look at the good games, or they go on that champion on this meta. But look, like, will they last another split, another year? I mean, I'm always going to bank on the Soazes, the Nuke Docs to stick around longer than some of the others that come in and out of the league. But you look at this guy, let's be real. Think of the other great players of the last years and how they tracked when they came into the LEC. Like, I think right now, 3 splits into his career, this guy's better than Humanoid was. This guy's better than Larson was. By the way, 3 splits into their career, these guys were already placing in top in the standings, going in the playoffs, into top finishes. I think actually, he might even be better than them entirely if he does well in this playoffs. Sure, Humanoid did it more. Larson's had more regular splits. I'm talking about in terms of the peak ability and what you've been capable of. And this guy is 19 years old. 19 years old. And effectively, in terms of LFL, LEC, he's only effectively played 2.5 years of that level of League of Legends. 1.5 years of the LEC level. So, man, I know people hammer that cliche, the sky is the limit. Because normally it's not that applicable. It's absolutely applicable. This guy could be the absolute best Western player. That's like on the table right now if you see his progression, who he's playing with, how he's playing, and how he develops split on split on split, and then how young he is and how inexperienced he is. So let's get into the Vetheo story, shall we? So before he was in the LEC, this is one of the success stories of the LFL, especially because he wasn't actually even someone who was polished in his LFL career because he only played a year. So in terms of like being a competitive player, he's only been playing since 2019, guys. Then in 2020, he was in the LFL with LDLC-OL, and in the first split, they were second place. But they went to EU Masters and they won it. If people don't forget, that was the one they played against the team where everyone was spamming all the shit about fucking Pookie style because he's a Polish player. Then after that, he was top 4 in the next EU Masters where they lost to Gamers Legion, who had the Tukui guy who's actually now in, isn't it like FlyQuest now, I think? Yeah. Obviously, at the time, by the way, interestingly, was way more hyped than Vetheo was. Then in the summer of LFL, they only finished in 4th. At the LFL finals, they finished 3rd. Now, listen, winning EU Masters will get your name in people's minds, it will get you on people's screens, you'll at least be considered in off-season. It's worked for many other players in the past. But even so, People now are going to retcon the story. I'm telling you, go back and look at the Reddit threads when this guy was announced and it was talked about that he was coming to Misfits. This was considered a surprise. There was plenty of people going, actually betting against him. He's too young. He's too inexperienced. It was a big, big gamble. He himself even said, by the way, before he came in, he thought he wasn't ready and he needed another year. If you go and look, people either wanted established names. Febevin was still around and considered a good player. He even played in Misfits. Let me think. Niski was coming back from LCS. Then you had people like Chekolad, who potentially could come up. You had Certus, who actually hadn't had his chance yet, but people wanted him over Vetheo. Let me think. Leader obviously was available, didn't come till Vitality till the summer. You could even add in people like Nuke Doc if you wanted to gamble on an old washed name. He played in Astralis, that split you might remember, before he got good in XL against. There was plenty of names you could have, and on paper maybe even should have gone with over Vetheo. But for whatever reason, Deficio at Misfits gambled on Vetheo, and oh boy has it paid off. Even if he ends up leaving at the end of this year, it has paid off like a motherfucker for at least 2 splits yet so far. Maybe 3 out of the 4. You could even argue all 4 if you actually weigh in the totality of how new the roster was and how many rookies were in some of these lineups, etc. So let's go to the first split that he played in LEC. It was last year, season 11, spring. Now, Misfits only finished in 7th place, so they missed out on the playoffs. But even so, he had some very, very impressive games on Zoe, which was already known to be like his main champion. He looked busted as fuck on that, and unsurprisingly, it's something you'd have to eventually ban against him because people saw when he leave it open, he just smurfed. He did have some issues in the champ pool beyond that. Like, look, in the LFL, he was already known to have a good LeBlanc. Like, people would ban it against him. He was a little bit dodgy when he tried to force it in the LEC. I thought he looked average to dodgy on Syndra, on Rise back then. He did actually, at the end of the split, almost at the end, it was in the last week, against Mad Lions, have a sick game on Silas. But beyond that, it's like he'd have a really good game or a promising game, often on a small limited champion pool, and then he didn't the other games. And so people were like, well, you know, he's got potential. There's something there. Like, he can look really good. Yeah, he won a few, like, play the games or whatever, a couple, I think. But aside from that, actually, some people thought, like, well, is that all we're going to get? Essentially, could you just ban Zoe against him? And also, like, he's just a good guy at team fighting with these champions, isn't he? So if you looked at his skill set after split 1, realistically, not taking into account anything we know now, you could already see with the eye test, his mechanics were clearly very strong, and especially on his champions and the assassins. He had good movement, good at casting abilities, getting auto attacks off, very good team fighting, even at the beginning, even in losing games, by the way. Go back and look at the week 4 game of spring against G2. He's pulling off some mega fights here, even though they lose the game. This is fucking G2, boys, remember? That was the team where Reckless would win the MVP, and people thought they were going to win that split for sure with the super team. He did, I think, have issues with map awareness, rotations. Like, I wonder, aside from the fact he's young and inexperienced, if having Yellow Star as his support in the LFL, a mega shot caller, an experienced player, one of the greatest captains of all time, and then even in LEC he had Vander kind of to babysit him a little bit. So I wonder myself about that, because that made it look like he was a little bit brain dead, and I think people were thinking of him more in the line of like how they would think of Leader because of the champion pool, and I think it's a bit unfair to Leader overall. I don't think he had as big issues in this regard. Just his champion pool and his playing style was a bit more one-dimensional. Even then, as I've pointed out in past videos, and that was exaggerated. He also would get caught sometimes in lane, even if he was really good in team fighting. So if you're a mid laner, that's going to be an issue, obviously. Now, as I said before, he did int some games. Like, as much as I'm going to praise him in this video, I wrote down a whole bunch of them when I went back. Like, in week 2 against Rogue, there was a ridiculous throw where he was just so many scenarios he just tossed into their lap, and they were one of the best teams, remember. Then he had a game in week 4 against Astralis where he had some mad dodgy packages on fucking Corki. Showed that, like, is he only like an assassin or a fucking Zoe player here? He had a game on Zoe where he went way too aggro jumping in. I think it was a Drake fight, which was against Vitality in week 8 of spring, last week. So you saw the games where he had nerves, or he just didn't know what to do. He was a bit lost in what to do in the lane, or at certain points in time in the game, when to rotate, when to group. Like, yeah, he sometimes had the issues. Once he could get into a team fight, he was mega, and his actual skills were clear. But yet again, he's very young, and he is a pure rookie to the LEC. And I actually think, like I said, as much as there's some bad games in here, and people had their criticisms, and they wondered, should you gamble and go for a different player? I've got to say, I actually think this guy also sent a message from the outset. Because in his first ever LEC game, he played against Fnatic, one of the best teams in Europe. He bought fucking Medjai's. This guy was just showing you, like, that's right, dick on the table. Now we're going to start cooking with gas. I guess the analogy just fucking fails there, but you get my point. This guy, he came into the LEC like, it's time to carry. And now he's doing it, even though he wasn't always doing it back then. So what I loved even back then was he was playing on the edge. He was playing to the limit of his mechanics, as so often people like Veteran, when I used to do my shows with him, Dominate, Zabatine would tell you is the way they want players to practice and play. And then the idea is you clean up the decision making, you clean up your sense for what to do in a game, you clean up your review sessions, etc. And then eventually you've tested your mechanics to the limit that they're just polished at the limit. And that's when you get Caps style play. That's when you get the true next level and you can unlock it. And this guy's already going from it from split one, from game one. Yes, please. So the cool thing is, Deficio has the eye for talent. And he stuck with this guy for summer. In fact, he stuck with the whole roster. And what do you know? They made the playoffs. They were 5th place overall. They were 4th place in the regular split. They were 1 game from beating Rogue in the upper bracket final. Oh, Rogue was the best team in the league. And weren't they 1 game from beating Fnatic in the lower bracket as well? So this team could have done so much, guys. This was actually a split that ended, if anything, tiny bit disappointing. They maybe could have gone further. They could have been a top 3, top 4 team. They could maybe have stolen that last world spot. And man, I'd love to have seen this guy at Worlds, even though, yes, very young in his career, so you can never know if he would end up getting perks, right? Now, here's the thing. After that summer, the summer split last year, it was obvious he individually had also gotten better, shot up his champion pool. He had way more good games. Like, he had 6 Player of the Game awards from LEC. By the way, that was half of the wins that Misfits even got that split. Yet he wasn't named all LEC because you had people like Caps, Humanoid, Niski, etc. in the league, in the top teams, unfortunately. He had a way better champion pool than he did in spring. Like, look, Akali was a bit busted, if you remember. I think it was at the beginning of summer. And to be fair, that had always been like a pocket pick of his previously anyway, so he did look mega on that as well. But the problem Vetheo for my money in the summer is that unfortunately for him, it was actually a different teammate who was the MVP standout, which was Razork. At the time, looked like a true MVP candidate and the best jungler in the LEC for my money. So I think while some of the attention went to Vetheo, he's got a lot better in the winning games, I think a lot of it went down to like, but Razork's playing Genius League of Legends, isn't he? He's brained out the game and he's looking mega. And obviously, by the way, that's why Razork ended up in Fnatic now. But there we go, right? So wait a minute, the best player by the experts leaves this team. And we come to this split, right? Well, this split, Misfits has finished 3rd in the regular split. We haven't had the playoffs yet. Despite the fact he has a worse lineup, Vetheo, than he did last split because of some of the changes. And overall, compared to the league, it should actually be worse. Like, remember, last split he had Razork, MVP candidate, maybe the best jungler. This split he had Zlatan. Okay, someone coming up with a little bit of hype out of the ERLs, but way slower starter, not as good a player at all. Hirit, actually, in the first split they ever played together in Season 11, arguably was maybe even better than Vetheo at times. Then was like, not as good as him in summer, but pretty good too, and looked pretty solid. He had maybe his worst split of his LEC career thus far, and only got it together towards the second half. Mercer's a rookie and didn't really start, to me, to really look like he understood what players to make until the latter part of the split. Neon was pretty good and carried some team fights. So basically, it was largely the Vetheo show. It just was. So this team won 12 out of their 18 regular split games. They were never ranked below 4th at any point in time, and they finished 3rd in the split. Now, here's the thing, guys. They ended up getting picked by Rogue, who were the number 1 seed. Now, why would they get picked by Rogue if they're 3rd and you could pick the 4th place team? Because everyone sees it's the Vetheo carry show for Misfits and you don't expect them to do that 3 out of 5 games. Meanwhile, G2's in 4th place with Caps and Yankos, dangerous players, and everyone's saying from scrims they're going to be better. So that kind of shows you, like, it was about Veteo's why Misfits was this good. Sure, Neon had some games, but the difference is, he's the player that's making them, but as a team, people are betting against them. So this was if you don't get it, the whole reason I've made this video is this particular split. This was a monster split. I've seen every split of EU LCS/LEC and LCS. This was an incredibly impressive individual split from Vetheo. He did 26.6% of his damage dealt. That's not supposed to be anything crazy. I'm just giving you the details here. I thought he laned way better than when he came in LEC, even better than he did in the summer last year. He won on 9 different champions. He picked 11 different champions in 18 games. So he isn't that small champion pool player just spamming only some. He only played 1 game of his Zoe, his signature champion, 2 of his LeBlanc, and 2 of his Akali. He only played 5 out of the 11 games on like signature champions of his. He's finally now able to play a Corki and look half decent. His Orianna wasn't terrible anyway, but looks even better now. He generally just looks like the mid laner. And quite frankly, I think if you look at this split for the regular portion, this is one of the best ever by a mid laner from Europe. I'm telling you. This is like prime Caps and Expechere level shit. And I'm mainly picking them because they were more flashy players and more the assassin players. If you want to go with the peaks of the other players, you can go with Prime Foggen from, I mean, Pete would say that's season 2, but I'm talking about you can even have an LCS in season 4, or you can go with, let me think who else would be that human. I guess actually Humanoid in the regular splits wasn't usually say. Larson in some of his splits last year looked mega, even going back to the summer of season 10. This guy, think about this for a second. Remember I told you they won 12 games. He was the player of the game in 10 of them. That is the most in the LEC by 3 awards. Sure, other people have more stacked teams. Yeah, that means they should win more games though, doesn't it? Neon won the other 2. Think about that. That's all 12 of the wins, guys. You don't get it typically in a loss. This guy monster stomped the fucking split. Now, one thing that's cool is I obviously do a lot of my shows and often have as a guest on my shows Zyrathenia, the French coach who previously worked in LCS with the likes of Optic and Immortals. Now, this guy individually, because he's French as well, coaches Vetheo. So I've had insight from him all the time, being able to ask questions. He said this guy has the best work ethic of any player he had worked with since beginning coaching in 2017. By the way, if people don't know, Zyrathenia worked with Crown when he had that like throwback split in the LCS a couple of years back. He worked with Power of Evil when he was actually getting his shit together in LCS after the Misfits period. This guy's just the best work ethic of any of these guys. He's even had Koreans on his teams, for fuck's sake. He said this guy will just practice 12 hours a day. And as you see, he plays on the edge. I even think that's pretty cool, by the way, that he essentially not only coming in had a very humble opinion of himself, but even now after this monster split, I'm telling you, is one of the craziest ever by an individual player, especially on a bad team or an average team. This guy, I'll put the interview in the description box below. He doesn't even think he's the best yet. Here's the quote. No, I don't think I'm there yet. I mean, I might be the best performing mid laner in the spring split, but I don't think I'm the best at all. And I need to show good playoffs and keep improving on my weaknesses. And after that, I will be the best. I love that last sentence. Listen, I realise he's French and he's young, so he might not have intentionally meant what I'm taking from that, but I love the idea, like, after I've done all that, though, I will be the best. I love that. Not like I might be there. I will be the best. He will be. This guy, that's the trajectory, guys. I'm going to go ham here, but who gives a fuck? The sky is the limit. He could be the best mid laner in EU. He could be the best player in EU. He could be the best player in the West. He could potentially be one of the best players in the world. That's for real where he is tracking at the moment. The skill set is clear. And quite frankly, he played to his mechanical skills from day one. And he has the work ethic this young in his career. He has a killer drive and mindset. He clearly has a carry mindset in the game as well. Now, it does help having solo coaching from someone like Zyrathenia, who, as I said, worked with the likes of Power of Evil, Niski. Did he work with Niski? I can't remember on that one, actually. No, Power of Evil, Crown. Like, if you work with people like that, like, those are totally different styles of mid laner. So you're going to have a lot you can potentially add to this guy and from different backgrounds. Now, of course, as much as it's epic that he's carried with these average to above average or below average teams, I would say more average and below average, he obviously needs to do in the playoffs. Like, that goes out saying, and he has to do it with some consistency in the playoffs. He wants to get the kind of rarefied air I'm suggesting, but this guy has so much potential, and I'm not someone who overuses that term. I normally bet against the so-called potential. This guy just has it in spades. It's overwhelming how much potential he has. I think this guy could potentially be very hotly contested in the offseason. Because people don't know, his contract ends at the end of this year. Now, sure, will the likes of G2, Fnatic, Rogue make a mid lane change? Doesn't seem likely, does it? But you look at some of the other squads out there. Does Mad Lions want to get back to a championship level? Does XL want to take the next step up and try and go for it all? If they go for a player like this and they pay big money, he's potentially available as a free agent. You can just walk in, you can just give him a mega salary, and you could have the best player in European League of Legends in your team. So, by the way, I've talked about the European teams there. I hope LCS is going to go hard as fuck for this guy. I don't hope he goes to LCS, but if I am the Cloud9s, Team Liquids, TSMs of the world, I'm getting my bids in the second it's possible in the off-season to try and sign this guy for millions of dollars, because he could be a game changer. And imagine if you sneak him away from Europe before he ever gets onto a truly elite team and you just get him in NA. That's some Jensen level shit, boys. So even if, by the way, this is how far I'm going to go, I'm going to really emphasize my point here. Even if he mega fails this playoffs, I will quadruple down that he will become a truly great player one day. Because here's the thing, I actually think the last player I saw that like came into the LEC and so quickly had a polished skill is in his skill set was actually Larson. Now sure, Larson's more on the mage, the control style, and he didn't really show up that often in the playoffs. It was more hit and miss. This guy is more the assassin aggro style player. But even so, the thing with a player that has this much potential and has now showed it and shown improvement, and then it's got the work ethic, got the mentality. When you have a player like that and all they're missing in this case would be like getting over their nerves and getting the performance down in the playoffs and being able to get the best out of their game in the playoffs. When you get a player like that, you don't bail if you have that guy. Because if you do, you're going to look silly when he goes to his next team. And if in the next split is the one he gets it together early on, and you could have just had him for another split, another year. So quite frankly, you gamble on this guy that you're the one to figure it out. You just say, I'm going to tank even maybe another split. Because when it works out, I don't just get a good player. I get the best player. That's when you get all the titles. That's when you get the dominance. That's when as a GM, by the way, you look like a genius. I'd compare him to what Device was in CSGO. If people don't know, you can go back to like 2015, 2016. Device is already one of the best players in the world, one of the best carries, the best player on his team, but he still has some issues getting over the hump in the biggest playoff games. But guess what? They stuck with him, and a couple of years later, they were winning majors, and he was the most decorated individual player, arguably ever in CSGO history. You won countless championships in era, majors, Grand Slam, everything. But if you'd have bailed on him, that'd be with some other team. Or you might just kill his confidence, might win no team ever, right? So I think this guy one day, lineups and GM fuckery withstanding, will be a champion if he continues on this track record, on this trajectory rather. And I think if he can even play 80% of what he did in the regular split, he can be dangerous for whoever plays him in these playoffs. And the thing is, I don't hype the rookies to LEC. I wasn't someone who was that impressed by Nemesis at the beginning all that often. I was someone who, yeah, you know what, it took a while before Humanoid went from like, oh, he's got a lot of potential, I like his playmaking, decisive, to like, wow, really good player. And that was mainly because he would always step his shit up in the playoffs, right? This guy is something else. Like I said, you have to get a very small list of players, and we're talking about people like Caps, if you want to get an analogue. This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Travis Goff, Adam Ochs, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Hades, Jensen Goh, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Thooorin, William Peyton Lacy, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and as always, special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming guests are. Maybe you want to take part in a lengthy donated discussion with me. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skruilluminati today. Where? Via the Patreon link in the description box.